That might literally be the best story of integrity I've ever heard.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome.
Because who would do that? I mean, who would just be like, oh, okay, cool, insurance.
Yeah.
But no, that's outstanding.
We talked about earlier today building this mentoring site, right? And we're all the product of mentors. We all have experience mentoring other people. So I wanted to kind of tease that out a little bit and talk about some of our experiences in and around mentoring. So as we're going through here, think of a time when somebody came in and made a real big impact on your life, or think of a time where, as a mentor, you were able to reach in and kind of get somebody back on track, push them in the right direction. Just do a quick discussion about this and then wrap up with some final thoughts.
Outstanding. Good
So,
subject.
Greg, why don't you kick us off?
I get to go first?
Yeah,
That's,
you said that you had a good story.
Yeah, it's funny they threw this subject at me, and I stumbled a little bit because I've got a ton of mentors, but I just couldn't pull it out of my head. But the one person that probably made the biggest impact in my life was a gentleman by the name of Al Jones, Marine, Vietnam, first group, in the shit, just rough as could be. And he got out of the Marine Corps and he was really into diving. And so he opened a scuba school, which everybody that opens a scuba school thinks they're going to make $1 million immediately. It's just like instant fame, right? You're going to make millions of dollars. And of course, it's a mom and pop business, and he was poor as the devil. And so anyway, I met him, and I was doing pretty well, and we were in Southern California. I was deeply, and if anybody's ever lived in Southern California, they know that you're just, your hair's on fire. That's why I have none anymore. And you're just busy because Southern California moves at a pace that no other place does. And I met him, and he convinced me that I should learn to scuba dive, and I had no interest at that particular time. I'd done it before in the past, but I really didn't have any interest in learning. And he convinced me to come down, and I bought equipment, because of course I got to have my own equipment if I'm gonna do something cool like that. If I'm gonna go in and into an environment where I have to have life-saving equipment, I don't want to use somebody else's nasty spit infested shit, right? So literally from the minute I took the first class, I was hooked, and I never gave it up. And even though I was running my own business at the time and we were working hideous hours, I found every available moment to go continue my training. So I got through my open water and just continued, and it never stopped. So I then became an assistant instructor, literally dove every opportunity I could, dove every weekend. When I got a class, I started helping with classes. And that, and over the years, progressed to my first instructor rating, one of many. When I look back on that, I realize how much it changed my life, because he had a connection in the Cayman Islands, which, so all I heard was the Cayman Islands. And, I'd fallen in love with this new sport, and I'd never done anything that completely encompassed my mind. As soon as I realized that I could live underwater, it absorbed my life. And I started realizing there was a better way to live. And of course, being strung out on living in California, stressed out all the time, moving 1,000 miles an hour, I found that when I'd gone out underwater, it was quiet, and it was peaceful, and I didn't have to listen to people say things. And it was a new place for me. And that quickly transitioned to literally giving up my business, quitting, everything that I was doing, literally throwing all my stuff in a 40-foot dumpster. And I just literally left one day for the Cayman Islands, a small 12-mile island, 80 miles east of Grand Cayman, which everybody knows. So it was a tiny little island, the islands were 50, 60 years ago. And I showed up with a longboard, skateboard, a bag of dive gear, and a backpack full of shorts and tank tops. And my plan was that I was going to check out from California, turn my brain off, and just enjoy doing what I was going to do. And I have no idea how this happened, but then suddenly 20 years went away, just vanished in a poof of smoke. And so when I think about mentors, I think about how radically he changed my life, by how my forward progress was business, and grind. And then I just suddenly locked up the brakes, put the emergency brake on, and stepped out of the roller coaster and found myself moving at the speed of a snail. And it probably was the best 2 decades of my life. And then as we get further into the elite use, some of you guys will find out what happened after that, and how I transitioned back into moving at the speed of light once again. So Al Jones, former Marine, God rest his soul, Agent Orange ended up taking him out. He ended up dying of cancer from Agent Orange. And but probably one of the best guys I ever knew, and introduced me to something that's still in my soul every day.
Yeah, so you listen to your mentor and you end up jobless and homeless. That's
I did,
a great
absolutely,
story.
man. Best move of my life. That's exactly it. Yep.
But for somebody else to see, you know, from an outside perspective, that the things that you valued were taking you in a direction that was harmful for your life, right? You probably wouldn't
Absolutely.
still be with us if you were running 100 miles an hour.
Absolutely. Radically changed my life.
That's awesome.
Yep. At the time, I didn't know, but certainly radically changed my life. Good stuff.
Next.
Ooh, me. Well, I was gonna say my dad, but in thinking about it, my mom.
Yeah.
Mentor-wise, some of the influences your life, and mom influenced it in the way that she went through life. I mean, she's still alive. She's still a firecracker. She's 5 foot, and she just doesn't stop. I come from a big family. This is a lot of us. And she raised us. She ran a bunch of schools, so committing her life to social work. Deaf schools. So I was raised in Pakistan. My parents run schools for the deaf, but mom was the principal for the schools. She would have us there teaching and helping with the kids. She would be pregnant with the next one while taking care of us while running other schools as well. She gave me the overall mindset that it's like as you can do anything. You just have to put your mind to it. You can either be soft and weak and, you know, everything can be a trouble and a burden, or you can like go after it, I guess. Like you can do a bunch of different things and stay strong, and like nothing is really impossible. And yeah, mom. The G.
Mom.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah, thank you. It's up to you.
Well,
You're up.
my stepdad, my stepfather, easy day. I mean, as far as I've had a lot of positive influences in my life, a lot of mentors, a lot of people that have taken me under their wing or literally stood right next to me when stuff was really bad. But when I go back to growing up and just being in those formative years as a young man, you know, there was influences here, influences there, but it wasn't until I was about 16 when I met him, when him and my mother got together. He's like 9 years older than me, which is kind of a weird dynamic for the family, you know. And when you think about it, I was 16 and my future stepfather was 25. So yeah, but yeah, just over the years, as the more I think about the the commitment to our family and the sacrifices that everybody made, I wouldn't have been able to do the things that I did based on what he did for us so early on. And beyond that, at a time where, again, very formative years in my life, to have the type of influence that he was, to kind of show me that there was a different road ahead, and to follow, and to just it was a really, really good baseline for somebody at that point. We've all been 16 and remember if there wasn't a vector there, how you could go one of several ways. And luckily for me, I had him there every day with me to kind of push me in the right direction during that last launch before I left home at 18. But
So tell me about a time where you did something that really sticks with you today.
Without getting into details, I mean, there was some bad times and there were some really good times with the family, but he was always the consistent, not mediator, but the one that had the definite decision and the push for the correct outcome. And whether you were able to assist with that or whether he did things on his own, it really showed me the good things about both ways.
Modeling behavior over time.
Well, there you go. Yeah, just you're good at putting what I'm trying to say brief and concise. But yeah. So and it's continued. You know, I can say a lot of things about a lot of folks in my life, but I've known him for 31 years now, and I have zero negative things to say about him. And I can't say that about most people in my life. There's always something.
Sure.
You know, no matter how pessimistic I try to be, I'm like, oh, yeah, vetting people or talking about, you know, pros and cons. You know, this guy consistently, you know, just never fails to never fails to be the positive thing. You know, even, you know, when I think about where we are in general as a society, with people that are just willing to do the bare minimum, just enough to not get fired, you know. And I think of folks like my stepfather, who has always been consistently really ahead of the game. He's been a union guy for a really long time, and guys just, they admire him, they choose to follow him. He's ran for certain positions like unopposed for, you know, 15, 20 years now. And it's just to see him, and even to go to him with, not sure what I'm going to do at this step in my life. You know, if you were me, you know, what would you do? You know, and his outcomes and his options were always very favorable. You know, and a lot of things have worked out better because I have him in my life.
One leader.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
Yeah. So, and with that, I mean, he's, you know, when you think in terms of leaders, you think of the person that's in the highest position in an organization, you know. But with those type of people, it was some kind of little comparison. It's like being a leader. You can't, if you have to remind people that you probably are not. And he just kind of like, he comes into any situation and literally just dominates it, takes it over. And it's not the hammer fisted, you know, aggressive approach. It's just his demeanor, his disposition about everything. You know, he's the boss. When he walks in a room, he's the boss.
I like that.
I try to aspire to that as much as I can.
Yeah. Thanks for opening up. That was really good.
It's very cool, man.
So tell us a story, Rob.
Just going around
Yeah.
this circle. Okay. I have so many people in my life who I do consider mentors. The one I'm going to mention right here now is my Uncle Pete.
Okay.
John Peterson, married to my Aunt Jane. He's gone now. But I had a troubled, like teen life, and took me a while to grow up. I'm naming my Uncle Pete because he is one of the main driving factors in like little Robbie becoming a man. And it wasn't even through like constant contact. I mean, I come from a big family and we're all very close.
Okay.
My Uncle Pete always seemed to find little intimate moments, quiet moments, and he would strike. He would hit me with a little bit of wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
And it was hardly ever anything, complicated. It's like, hey, people don't want to hear you complain.
It's true.
Yes.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to hear you complain about anything. Okay. So I get it. Like you want to do this instead of doing that. You're going to go do that, right? You're going to go do what your mom told you to do because that's the right thing to do. On top of that, just don't complain about it because here's what it does. And he would kind of lay these things out. These are not things that intuitively, as a, say, 12, 13-year-old, to be true.
Mm-hmm.
These are things that are taught to you, preferably taught to you by someone who knows the deal. Otherwise, these lessons will be learned over and over and over again, or taught to you. And maybe you never will learn them, but much the same way as you were talking about your stepdad, my Uncle Pete was just an exemplary guy in my eyes. He was always doing what I considered to be the right thing. He was very even-handed and calm, but he knew what he stood for when it came to all the important things that like my young self was kind of being introduced to. And he just helped me navigate those things in an effortless way. And I spoke briefly at his funeral and tried to convey a little bit of that to my family. I almost chuckled in the middle of it because our church, most of us grew up in the same town, went to the same schools, same church, all this stuff. The church was so echoey. This is something it was a bone I had to pick with my church my entire life. But, you know, what are you going to do? You don't say anything about that. I had been gone because I joined the Army when I was 17 for so many years. When I finally went back, and here I am speaking to my family about the impact that my Uncle Pete had on me. I really wanted to say some things. I don't think anybody heard it because it was so echoey. The thing was for me, I just felt good speaking those words for my Uncle Pete, almost to my Uncle Pete once I realized nobody was understanding what I was saying. Microphone, speakers, big boomy church. But I think about him often.
Sure.
And I hope, you know, I'm doing him proud. And yeah, that's my mentor.
So it doesn't have to be formal. It's not a big event. It's not a quarterly mentoring. Just those quiet, teachable moments. Take advantage of everyone to, you know, to pass along. I'm sure Uncle Pete would tell you, you know, who spoke into his life, and he's passing those nuggets along to you.
Yeah.
So a lesson for all of us to take advantage of those. And I think it's important to do that with peers as well, right? You think of the mentoring relationship as this huge divide, and a lot of those stories have been that way. But a lot of times you're just sharing what you learned with a friend, and they perceive it as mentoring. Like they get a lot out of it. But I don't think, I'm not a mentor to Mike. We just share with each other, you know. And he tells me, you know, the things that he's working on. I tell him the things I'm working on, and we share our wins together and share our struggles together. You know, those little quiet, teachable moments are super important, and they accumulate over time.
Yeah,
There's something powerful. Yeah.
There's a lot to be said about when you hear the word mentor, you think of somebody above you.
Right.
I mean, the fact is that somebody can be your mentor and you can be theirs equally. Like there's no reason why they have to be above you, you know.
100%.
So, you know, when I talk about mentor, especially on the Elite You, it's just basically someone you see just a little bit past or a little bit more developed in an area that you're just trying to absorb information, or it's an experience that they've had that you know you might run into down the line. So you listen to that, and therefore that is going to increase your knowledge a little bit, and hopefully you can veer off and not have to make the hard, you know, the world is not going to teach you that lesson, you know, the hard way. But yeah, it's not like you're looking up at someone, you know, so it's interchangeable with the peer, I guess. But yeah,
True.
It's more that, you know, it's not the relationship and necessarily of being in a formal leadership position. It's the relationship of the knowledge transfer.
if you're enjoying this video, I want to take a second to talk about EliteU.com, where you'll be able to find early access to all of our YouTube content, as well as exclusive interviews and access to mentors. And now back to the video.
So mine will be about my grandfather.
Okay.
So my life growing up was a little bit different, a little tough. I was in the country. I was a country boy, and my father wasn't really around a lot. So my brother was diagnosed with cancer when I was 2.5 years old, and it was going to be terminal. And through all that, my dad was kind of intermittent, but someone who was always there was my dad's dad. So he was just like the foundation of the family, essentially. And when my dad came back into the picture again, he knocked my mom up with my sister. So now my mom is pregnant. My brother's in the hospital every single day with cancer. And then there's me. And so it's like, well, what do we do with him? Because I was about to start kindergarten. And so my grandfather stepped up and said, hey, he can come live with me on the farm. It's like, okay. So I went to live with him, and I was like, man, boy, did stuff change. Discipline, you're going to take this trash out. You're not going to be a little asshole. You're going to get up at this time. You're going to go outside. You're going to mow the damn yard. You want to ride your 4-wheeler dirt bike? This is what you're going to do, you know? And so it was really crazy because, you know, later on in my life, I found out that my dad cheated on my mom and ended up marrying that woman. Crazy long story. But what was really nice was throughout this whole time, I had so much anger, you know, built into my body. And so kind of like you, I had a troubled teenage years. I was getting in fights at school. I was getting suspended. And he never yelled at me. He was always so calm. And he'd just be like, well, what are you going to do now for the next 2 weeks? And I was like, if I didn't answer, like I was going to do chores and do a bunch of stuff, he's probably going to beat my ass. and so then it was just like, well, I guess I'll do this. And then, you know, later on, I came to him, you know, just turned 18, graduated top of my class for like welding and stuff. And I was like, I don't really want to do this. I think I'm going to join the military. And he was like, well, have you thought about it a lot? I'm like, no, I just got this packet from a friend of mine who joined and I think I'm going to go do it. And he was like, okay. Didn't try to talk me out of it. Nothing. Everybody else wanted to talk me out of it. And he just, every time, even now, still to this day, I go to him and he just listens. He lets me get everything out and then he adds the advice. Whereas it's really difficult for a lot of people to just have that listen because they want to interject because they have ideas and they'll forget those ideas. He doesn't forget. He's just like, okay. And he'll just nod his head very quietly. And then he'll let you know what he thinks. And then it's like, that's what I needed to hear every single time. So that's my story.
Nice.
I like it, man.
There's a lot more to it. It gets crazier, but we'll save that for another time.
Stay tuned on the elite years.
Yes.
There's a story about somebody stepping up and filling a role for somebody else. You know,
Yeah, that's huge.
That he was there and made a huge difference in your life and didn't have to.
Yeah,
You
100%.
volunteered, you stepped up, and you did it. That's I think people that want to come and you know and get in front of the cameras, which is a little nerve wracking. You know, we're trying to do in that same vein, trying to step up and share, and hopefully we can make a difference in other people's lives.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. I want to tell a story about my dad. Learned a ton. He's definitely my first mentor, and I still talked to him last night. Actually, talked to him a lot about things. Very wise man. But I think one of the first lessons I really learned from him that stuck with me is about integrity. My dad is always the same guy. If you run into him downtown, you run into him at church, you run into him on the job site, he is the same man all the time. He just lives an integrated life. Every part of his life is integrated with every other part of his life. You're never gonna like catch dad kicking the dog or something. He's just the same guy all the time. And so he got out of the Navy. He was at Lemoore Naval Air Station, and we stayed there in Southern California. There's a lot of ag there, and there's tons of ag planes flying around. So he was an airplane mechanic in the Navy. He was a jet airplane mechanic. Got out and got a job fixing airplanes there, and saw these ag planes running around. And when these crop dusters would break, they would fly the airplane broken to a mechanic somewhere to get it fixed, and which isn't particularly safe. But it's the only option, right? Because they would just go find a mechanic that they trusted, and they'd fly the airplane to him. And he's like, well, guy could get a truck and some tools and drive around and fix all these airplanes where they sit. So these airplanes would fly all night and spray. And then when they land, he'd call dad and say, hey, you know, this is what needs to be done. And we'd hop in the truck and drive around and fix the airplanes. And I was homeschooled at the time. So our deal was when you got your school done for the week, you go to work with dad. So we'd jam through it all, do our work in like Monday and Tuesday. And then the rest of the week, you're out driving around with dad fixing airplanes. And one time we're on a job site. He gets a phone call. There's an airplane crashed. And it was an airplane that was just in his hangar the week before. He's okay. The pilot's calling him from the side of the field. He's like, well, tell me what happened. And he describes how it happened and the power loss and how it worked. And my dad's kind of turning things over in his mind. He says, okay, I'm going to drive over right now. I think that was our fault. And so we hop in the truck, we drive over there, and there's this airplane upside down in the cotton field, just the wheels sticking up in the air. It's not good. And so we jump out of the truck and we're walking out, and the insurance adjuster is out in the field and he's walking away from the airplane. And he and my dad meet halfway out, and he says, hey, Ken, how's it going? Don't worry about it. We just checked it over. It's a mechanical failure. We're going to cover it. And my dad's like, well, just hold on a second. I think this is my fault. And the insurance adjuster stops in the tracks. He's like, no, Ken, it's mechanical failure. We're going to cover it. My dad's like, well, just give me a second. And he's already got a screwdriver in his hand. He walks out to the airplane, takes off one panel, reaches inside, touches a nut, and it was loose. He's like, that's the part we worked on. My guys left that loose. This is my fault. And I remember like not getting new shoes for a while, you know, because my dad's new business was trying to pay off his airplane. And he would not let anybody else take the responsibility for that. He's like, that's my airplane. It's my fault. And I will never, ever forget that.
That's true integrity.
Yeah.
That's
Wow.
And, you know, that he was, you know, it was the first couple of years of business, and we didn't know if that was going to put him out of business or would people not trust him anymore. And as it turns out, like, it was completely the other way. There was like, what kind of mechanic has that kind of integrity? I don't want anybody else touching my airplane.
Yeah.
But we didn't know that at the time. We didn't know that for the next couple of years as we were fighting through trying to make ends meet. But I remember my dad watching him do that, and thought, if he will keep his integrity at that cost, you know, I don't think there's a price worth paying to get my dad to break his integrity. So.
that might literally be the best
Yeah.
story of integrity I've ever heard.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome.
Because who would do that? I mean, who would just be like, oh, okay, cool, insurance.
Yeah.
But no, that's outstanding.
Well, I obviously have a couple mentors. The one that really stands out is about the same age range that everyone seems to kind of talk about. I met my jiu-jitsu instructor when I was 15, and it was after a number of attempts to find one, and those are stories that I can tell at a later time, because they speak to the integrity thing that was just talked about. But Carlos Machado was the person that influenced me the most, and it had very little to do with jiu-jitsu. So obviously he's world renowned there, but his willingness to stay available at any time, from the moment that I met him, all the way through. Like, I could call him about anything and he would just be available, and he would listen to whatever the scenario was, and he would give me wisdom on things that sometimes would take years to even manifest. And he did that with his jiu-jitsu too, where he would teach me something and I wouldn't get it. And it would be a real frustrating thing, but it would almost be like he knew that I would struggle with it and grind on that. And at some point I would stop, and a couple years later, it would just click. And it would almost be like I could hear his voice in my head when it happened. And then I would match a principle to it. And I'd be like, that's an amazing thing. And one of those things was how to learn. Like, it's a skill that he gave me because I was working at my father's martial arts school. He ran the contracts. We had the Q course for close combat. And I'm sure that I'll tell stories on my childhood. It was very colorful. But the thing is that because I was in Fayetteville and he was in Dallas, I didn't have a normal instructor to student kind of relationship. In jiu-jitsu, normally you have somebody right next to you and they just kind of guide you. And a lot of times people take that for granted, one, as a student, and then two, the instructor does, because the instructor knows that they can always fix a problem at any given time. So they don't go in depth on things because, well, that takes a lot of energy. And I learned that is a fault of a lot of instructors, just because, you know, it's like, hey, if I see you do an armbar wrong, I'm not going to teach you why you are essentially getting that wrong in the principle. I will just fix that armbar, that particular thing. And so it's like fixing the symptom, right? So the thing is he goes, look, your father sends you here, and I would go there for a week. Dad would pay for privates for an entire week, and they were very costly. And what he would have me do when I was working with him is I would take a notebook. It's probably one of the reasons why I carry a notebook all the time. And I would write down every single technique and everything that he taught me. And after a week of training with Carlos, I would come back to Fayetteville and I would use the Q course students as cannon fodder to practice, and drill and do whatever. And Dad would send me back probably like 6 months, 7 months later. And Carlos would review those things. And in turn, what would happen is if I passed appropriately to his standard, he would give me the next grouping of whatever lessons. And if not, we would go back. And it would be a costly mistake because not only did I have to endure that again, I had to go back to my father and tell him that I had wasted an entire week of privates, and at $400 an hour and 8 hours a day, that kind of, it adds up. So the thing is that he taught me how to learn, right? And it clicked over time that lesson, it spanned everything I did in my life. It had nothing to do with just jiu-jitsu. And if you practice jiu-jitsu, it's a rare thing for people to get the black belt, just in comparison to how many people start jiu-jitsu and how many people actually get to that goal. It's an extremely rare thing for somebody to essentially train themselves to black belt and have a continuous progression without stopping, right? So like what happens is a lot of times you can grapple by yourself or with other mentors giving you techniques or whatever, and you can get to certain ranks. But what happens is because someone's not there with you, they can't teach you how to get over certain humps that you're going to hit at like brown belt and black belt and that type of thing. But the system that he had taught me, or the way that he had given me, and I didn't even know it was happening, was he taught me how to dissect things, just look at patterns and, take issues like goals that were difficult and to break them down into very, very small increments and then just master that one piece and understand that, hey, I'm going to do 5 steps. When I do 5 steps, in turn, I need to progressively understand that I do 1 okay, then the 2, then the 3. And if I can't get the 4, there's something wrong with 3 or 2 on my setup. And then they spend time there. And then eventually I get the 4 and then I complete the technique. And it's the same thing with anything in life. Like you are breaking down these larger goals into smaller goals. And it developed something that allowed me to work with people like Jack Nevels, because I could take his CQB and his shooting and be like, hey, this is what everybody teaches. And one of the things that you learned is guys get really, really good at stuff. And sometimes they don't even know what they're doing. They just do it, right? And as somebody from the outside, if you know how to learn, and then obviously the teaching aspect of it, you eventually are able to go, this is what you say you do. This is what people see. This is the secret sauce that connects all of that, right? And this is the thing that's kind of a little bit, it's hidden, right? Like, and that is the part that everyone needs to kind of focus on. And then what happens is it's there. And so Carlos just, he did that with everything throughout my life. And it was the understanding that anytime I had a problem, he'd listen to me all the way. And instead of allowing the emotion of the event, so if somebody did me wrong, or if our family's business was in trouble, or if contracts didn't work out, I would give him the story, and then he immediately would ask about what I thought the other person's viewpoint was. And he would ask, do I know what kind of situation they're coming from? Whether or not they were angry or their home life was whatever. And those factors I learned down the line matter a lot, because you can become emotional in a response only to realize later that whatever they did to slight you was just a byproduct of something else that they were dealing with, And so he taught me how to be a good instructor, a good person, how to care about people that even when they slight you, you consider that. And so when you respond, or if you respond or you don't respond, the thing is that that's coming from something that you're thinking through the process. And when you're thinking through the process, it actually refines you, right? And obviously, I am very thankful for the jiu-jitsu aspect of it. But to be able to sit there and I think this is where a lot of elite youth stuff comes from. I sat for hours and hours and hours and hours on YouTube, scouring for jiu-jitsu film and just watching jiu-jitsu film. And just like professional football teams, they study film. I did that in a way where I would take somebody with the same body type, somebody I aspired to be. And then what I would do is initially I'd send it to him and he would tell me what you need to focus on this are these areas, right? And then he would teach me how to dissect those matches. And then eventually what would happen is he would, if I asked him for help, he would stop. And that's another part of that whole process is at some point he would stop giving me the advice because technically I was using it as a crutch. I was using him as a cheat code for whatever it was. And it's like, I know that you know how to do this. And so what you're going to do is now you'll create your own homework. You're going to watch that film and then you're going to implement whatever the skill set is. And then we would talk about it. And one of the coolest parts about that was a couple of years ago, I got to reconnect with him just because of our paths kind of like went away from each other. And I continue to study jiu-jitsu. He obviously runs a very successful association and all this. And we met up and we did the whole trade thing with a mentor. Like, I'm working on this technique and he's working on this one. And the really cool part about it was there was a technique that I was talking about, a principle. And we basically were saying the exact same thing that we were both working on. And the conclusion was close to themselves. And it was just a moment of being proud to go, wow, like normally you could talk to a mentor like that and they'd be like, oh, yeah, I went over that. That was like 10 years ago. And it's just like, whatever, you know, and then they go off of that. But the thing is that his process that he was working on was close to what I was. And it's not that I'm anywhere near him. It's just that it was something where I was like, it's cool to understand that I took what he gave me and could refine it to the point where we were now tackling similar things, you know. But yeah, that is one thing that I learned, and it's also something that I immediately pass on to people. It is not a hard skill to learn, to be able to take things and go, whatever subject it is, these are the things that are going to yield the most result. And then what happens is as you gain a good foundation, you just hyper focus on areas that are very, very important. And then you find areas to just challenge yourself in that. And then once you feel like you're making diminishing returns, you just hit another thing on hyper focus. And what happens eventually, you realize that your skill is just growing in leaps and bounds. And so it allowed me just to take that not only in jiu-jitsu, but in life and all of the shooting stuff and and then also understanding other mentors and connecting that with other people. And I was like, you know, people subconsciously do this. Those that master skills, they do that, but maybe they don't put it in words, you know.
And I hear you talking about a really thoughtful, deliberate process. Where not just answering questions or trying to offload information, but thinking about the goal of where he wants you to be, and then taking deliberate steps to get you there.
Yeah.
And that's that's a lifetime of being a master and a teacher and coach. He's got that, but it's something we can all take away in our mentoring processes. It's not maybe giving some of the answer that they're looking for is not the right answer. Maybe showing them the path of how to find themselves is better for them in the long run.
Yeah. And I mean, there's a lot that came from working with him, just like any mentor that I had. But I would say that was the one skill that affected most things that I know that I still reach in my back pocket and pull out. And I realize that that's what I'm doing. And there's no other place that I can give credit to because childhood was obviously not the greatest at that point. And the mentors that I had at the time, unfortunately I found were supplements to the lack of mentors I had. So you have bad examples, and then you're like, that person's not as bad, you know. So like I can do that. But he legitimately was the first person that I was just like, I want that. I want to be like that. I want to be able to look at a problem and then be able to come up with 15 different solutions, and then look at the person that's asking me and go, for me, it would be the third one, but I'm going to tell you the 14th one because that's the answer that you need. And not only that, I'm going to tell you how I got to that. And so if you really want to know about it, you can come up with that solution later by yourself. And I feel like that just allowed me to learn.
Learning from negative examples, that could be a whole other talk.
Yes. Or things you have to unlearn because.
Sure.
Yes.
Well, that was really productive. We talked a lot about mentors. We learned, they can see things from outside and give us a new perspective and get you on a new track. They can set a positive example over time without even saying anything. Or we're looking for those little opportunities to just pass along little nuggets that accumulate over time. They can not just pass along knowledge, but put you on a path to go and find that own knowledge, so you can start to develop as a person, not just get easy answers. So a lot of things I took away a lot from this that I want to apply immediately. So I appreciate you guys. Thanks.
Thank you guys. Appreciate you sharing.
Thank you for watching, and if you enjoyed that content, we have more videos over here for you to check out. For those of you looking to enhance your knowledge, make sure that you go over to eliteu.com, where you will have early release of YouTube videos and access to exclusive content. Thank you for watching, and we will see you in the next video.